Hey guys, tonight we're going to a quiet, dusty corner of New Mexico, just after the Second World War. Imagine you're on a sprawling sheep ranch under an impossibly vast sky, the air still buzzing with the recent memory of global conflict and the nervous energy of a new atomic age. The sun is hot, the work is hard, and the strangest thing you've seen all week is a jackrabbit that seemed a little too confident. And then, one morning, you stumble upon something that doesn't belong, something scattered for miles, something not of this earth. The incident you're about to step into is so layered with mystery and misinformation that, were you the real protagonist, you probably wouldn't survive this with your original story or your sanity intact. So before you get properly cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what we do here. Feel free to post your city and local time in the comments. It's always nice to know where everyone is settling in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for some gentle, ambient hum, and let's get settled in for tonight's journey. The air in early July, 1947, is a special kind of hot. It's a dry, baking heat that seems to radiate up from the very soil of the New Mexico desert, making the distant mesas shimmer like water. You are William Mac Brazel, a ranch foreman, and this land is your office. You know its rhythms, its secrets, the way the light falls at dusk, and the particular sound a thunderstorm makes when it rolls in miles away. The night before was a wild one. A proper New Mexico light show. Thunder so loud it rattled the fillings in your teeth. You'd heard a strange, explosive sound over the cacophony of the storm. But in this part of the world, you chalk things like that up to nature's fury and go back to sleep. Now, the morning after, you're riding out with the neighbor's kid, checking on the sheep. They're spooked, scattered in a way you've never seen. And that's when you see it. It's not one thing. It's a field of things. A vast swath of debris, stretching for nearly a mile, maybe 300 or 400 feet wide. It's a mess, but it's a strange mess. This isn't the familiar, splintered wood of a downed civilian plane or the twisted metal of a V-2 rocket test gone wrong from the nearby White Sands missile range. This is different. You dismount your horse, its ears twitching nervously. You nudge a piece of the wreckage with the toe of your boot. It's a thin, metallic-looking sheet, almost like foil. You crouch down and pick it up. It's impossibly light, lighter than aluminum, lighter than balsa wood. You crumple it into a tight ball in your fist, the material making a sound like crinkling cellophane. Then you open your hand. The foil, without a single crease or wrinkle, immediately springs back to its original, perfectly flat shape. You do it again, harder this time, really trying to mar it. Same result. It's like a magic trick. It has a memory of its own shape. You walk further into the field. There are small, I-beam-like sticks, maybe a couple of feet long. They're also bizarrely light, and when you try to bend one over your knee, it won't give. It feels like trying to bend a ray of solid light. Along the inner channel of these beams, you see markings. They look like some kind of writing, but it's nothing you recognize. Not English, not Spanish, not any kind of symbol you've ever seen on a crate or a machine. They're delicate, almost geometric, with shades of purple and pink, almost like hieroglyphs from a culture that never existed. They look alien. You see other materials too. A brittle, black, plastic-like substance that you can't scratch or burn with your lighter. A thread-like material, impossibly strong. It's all just wreckage. But it's wreckage from something you can't begin to comprehend. This was the era just after World War II, a time when American optimism was at a high, but so was a simmering Cold War paranoia. The idea of advanced technology, secret weapons, and threats from the sky wasn't just science fiction. It was a daily feature of the newsreels. You're a practical man. You don't jump to conclusions about little green men. Your first thought is that it must be some new kind of government project, a secret weather balloon, or a spy plane. The Roswell Army Airfield, RAF, is just down the road, after all, and they're always up to something. But this debris, it feels more advanced than anything you can imagine your own government cooking up. Some of the foil-like material has a papery backing, almost like a kite. It's this detail that sticks with you. So simple, yet attached to something so profoundly strange. Sheep ranching in New Mexico was a tough business, and ranchers often supplemented their income in unusual ways. But selling scrap metal from a spaceship wasn't exactly a common side hustle. You gather up an armful of the most interesting pieces, stuffing them into a sack. You'll take them into town when you get a chance. Maybe Sheriff Wilcox will know what to make of it. For now, you have sheep to round up. But as you ride away, you can't escape the feeling that the sky over your ranch holds a new and unsettling secret. Historians still debate the precise timeline of these first few days, particularly how long Brazel waited before deciding the debris was unusual enough to report, a delay that adds another layer of mystery to the unfolding events. You spend a few days mulling it over. The pile of strange material sits in your shed, a quiet metallic enigma among the familiar smells of hay and rusted tools. Every now and then you go and check on it, picking up the memory foil and watching, amazed, as it smooths itself out in your palm. You show it to your wife, and she's just as baffled. The story of pilot Kenneth Arnold, sighting of flying saucers over Washington state, had just hit the news a couple of weeks prior, and the phrase is on everyone's lips. It's a summer of strange skies. The more you think about it, the less this looks like any kind of balloon you've ever heard of. Finally, you decide it's time to stop guessing. You load a decent sample of the debris into the back of your pickup truck and make a long, dusty drive into Roswell. Let's take a closer look at what you found, at the physical evidence that will become the very core of this entire sprawling mystery. The memory foil is the star of the show. Decades later, witnesses would describe it as being as thin as the wrapper on a pack of cigarettes, but utterly indestructible. You could not tear it, burn it, or dent it with a sledgehammer, they'd claim. Yet, it was so light it would float to the ground like a feather when dropped. It had a dull, grayish-silver color on one side and a more reflective mirror-like finish on the other. The official explanation, which would come much later, was that this was simply the metallic-coated paper used in the radar reflectors of a Project Mogul balloon train. Project Mogul was a top-secret U.S. Army Air Forces project at the time, designed to use high-altitude balloons to detect the sound waves from Soviet atomic bomb tests. It was cutting-edge, classified, and certainly not something a rancher in New Mexico would be expected to recognize. Then there are the I-beams. These small, structural-looking pieces were about the thickness of a pencil and ranged from a few inches to a couple of feet long. They were incredibly lightweight but rigid. The most captivating feature, of course, was the writing. Witnesses, including Major Jesse Marcel's own son, would later describe seeing a line of symbols running along the inner recess of the beams. They were described as geometric, a mix of circles, triangles, and lines, almost like a futuristic form of mathematics or an unknown alphabet. The colors were purplish-violet, and they seemed to be part of the material itself, not painted or stamped on. The Air Force's eventual explanation for these mysterious glyphs was, to put it mildly, anticlimactic. They claimed it was merely decorative tape, manufactured by a company in New York. The tape had pinkish or purplish floral designs on it, little flowers and hearts, and was used to hold the radar reflector sticks together. The leap from alien hieroglyphs to flowery Scotch tape is a chasm that many researchers find impossible to cross. There were other, less discussed materials in that field. Chunks of a black, plastic-like material, almost like bakelite, that was brittle but couldn't be damaged. It was described as being different from any known plastic of the era. There were also reports of optical fibers or monofilament threads, incredibly fine and incredibly strong. It's important to remember that in 1947, materials like fiber optics and memory metals were not part of the public lexicon. They were the stuff of pure science fiction. The atomic bomb had proven that previously unimaginable science was now a reality, which made the public more inclined to believe in extraordinary technological leaps. Yet for all its strangeness, the debris had one very terrestrial quality. It had no smell, no acrid, burnt odor of an explosion, no chemical smell of fuel. It was clean, sterile, and silent. You, as the rancher, aren't thinking about Project Mogul or decorative tape. You're holding a piece of material that defies the laws of physics as you understand them. It's this tangible physical weirdness that compels you to drive to the sheriff's office. This isn't just a story you heard. It's something you can hold in your hand. Historians debate whether the descriptions of the debris became more exotic over time, embellished by decades of retelling, or if the original materials were truly as anomalous as witnesses claimed. Were they seeing mundane balloon materials through the lens of flying saucer hysteria? Or were they holding fragments of something genuinely not of this world? One peculiar, lesser-known detail is that some early accounts mentioned a black box among the debris, though this element of the story often gets lost in the focus on the foil and beams. What could a black box from a 1947 crash, alien or otherwise, have recorded? The thought is tantalizing. The drive to town is long, and the sun beats down on your truck. You have no idea that this simple act of civic duty is about to ignite a firestorm that will still be burning more than 75 years later. The Chaves County Sheriff's Office in Roswell is a bastion of earthy, no-nonsense authority. The air inside smells of old paper, stale coffee, and the faint, dusty scent of the high desert clinging to everyone's boots. You walk in, sack of strange junk in hand, feeling a little foolish. You're here to see Sheriff George Wilcox. He's a respected man in town, not prone to flights of fancy. You explain your story, trying to sound as grounded and sane as possible. You talk about the storm, the scattered sheep, and the massive field of debris you found on the Foster Ranch where you work. Then, you open your sack and dump a few of the pieces onto his desk. Sheriff Wilcox looks at the small pile of material. He picks up the memory foil. He crumples it. He watches it unfold. His eyebrows raise a fraction of an inch, which for a man like Wilcox is the equivalent of a gasp. He tries to scratch one of the black, plastic-like fragments with his pocket knife. The blade skitters off without leaving a mark. He examines the I-beam with its strange, purplish symbols. You can see the gears turning in his head. He's seen plane crashes before. He's seen weather equipment. This is neither. The role of a county sheriff in the American West of the 1940s was broad. They were part lawman, part community leader, and part liaison to bigger, more powerful entities like the federal government. Wilcox knows when something is above his pay grade, and this is definitely it. He picks up the phone. His first calls are to other local authorities, trying to see if anyone is missing a weather balloon, a plane, or, well, anything else. No one is. The mystery deepens. The sheriff and his deputies, including B.A. Clark, handle the material. They try to make sense of it, passing the memory foil around, each of them testing its strange properties. It becomes a local curiosity, a head-scratcher. There's no panic, no talk of an invasion. It's just a genuine, tangible puzzle. One of the more peculiar and often forgotten details from this moment comes from Sheriff Wilcox's wife, Inez. She later recalled handling the debris herself, noting how utterly strange and foreign it felt. She even mentioned that one of the deputies made a joke about it being from another planet, a comment made in jest that would later seem eerily prescient. The key decision comes when Sheriff Wilcox realizes who he needs to call: the military. Roswell is, first and foremost, a military town. The Roswell Army Airfield is the biggest and most important operation for hundreds of miles. It's home to the 509th Bombardment Group, the elite unit that had dropped the atomic bombs on Japan just 2 years earlier. If anyone has been testing something new and secret, it's them. If anyone can identify this stuff, it's them. So the call is made. Historians debate exactly who made the crucial call to the base. Some accounts say it was Sheriff Wilcox himself, while others suggest he first contacted the USAF's local provost marshal, who then escalated the report. It's a small detail, but it speaks to the chain of command and how the information began its journey from a local law enforcement issue to a matter of national security. The person on the other end of that line at the Air Office, Major Jesse Marcel, the base's intelligence officer. The sheriff explains what he has, and you, the rancher, probably get on the phone to give a first-hand account. Your description of the materials, the indestructible foil, the lightweight beams, the strange symbols is enough to pique Marcel's interest. This doesn't sound like a standard weather balloon, which was a common sight. The military used balloons constantly for weather prediction, and they were familiar objects. In fact, a popular pastime for kids in the 1940s was collecting the instruments from downed weather balloons, which often had a small reward attached for their return. But your description suggests something far beyond that. Marcel tells the sheriff to hold on to the material and that he'll drive into town to take a look. He also asks you to keep quiet about the discovery for now. You leave the debris with the sheriff and head back to your ranch. You've done your part. You found something strange. You reported it to the proper authorities, and now it's in their hands. As you drive, you feel a sense of relief. The mystery is someone else's problem now. You have no idea that the phone call you just witnessed has set in motion a series of events that will spiral wildly out of control. You don't know that your name, Mac Brazel, will become inextricably linked with the word UFO. You don't know that your quiet life is effectively over. You just think you've cleaned up some weird trash from your pasture. Back in Roswell, Sheriff Wilcox secures the small sample of debris in a locked room, waiting for the arrival of the man from the base. The quiet local phase of the Roswell incident is over. The military is now involved, and everything is about to change. The drive from the Roswell Army airfield into town isn't long, but for Major Jesse Marcel, it's filled with anticipation. As the base intelligence officer, your job is to analyze and evaluate potential threats and unusual occurrences. You're a veteran of the Pacific Theater, a man who has seen the destructive power of advanced technology firsthand. You're not a gullible man, but you have an open and curious mind. The sheriff's description of the debris was tantalizingly strange. When you arrive at the sheriff's office, the atmosphere is one of quiet excitement. Sheriff Wilcox leads you to the material he's been holding. The moment you see the debris, you know it's something out of the ordinary. You pick up the foil. You crumble it. It springs back to shape in your hand, just as the rancher described. You examine the I-beams. The purplish, symbolic markings are unlike any form of writing you've ever encountered in your intelligence career, and you've seen a lot. This isn't Russian, it isn't Japanese, and it certainly isn't a secret American code you've been kept out of the loop on. It feels ancient and futuristic at the same time. You're holding physical evidence of something. You feel a jolt, a professional thrill. This could be it. This could be the real thing. It's important to remember that the Roswell Army Airfield was not just any airbase. It was the home of the 509th Bomb Group, the world's only atomic weapons-capable military unit. The base was one of the most secure and strategically important facilities in the United States. The idea that something could crash nearby, undetected, was both alarming and fascinating. You make a decision. This is too significant to handle in a sheriff's office. You tell the sheriff that the military will be taking over the investigation. You also need to see the crash site for yourself. You arrange to meet Mac Brazel and have him guide you out to the debris field. Before leaving, you collect the samples from the sheriff and, in a move that would become a key part of the Roswell lore, you swing by your house on the way back to base. It's late, but you wake up your wife and your 11-year-old son, Jesse Jr. You can't contain your excitement. You spread the pieces out on the kitchen floor. "Look at this," you say. "It's from a flying saucer." You show your son the memory foil and the beam with the strange symbols. For a young boy in 1947, this is the stuff of dreams. This moment, sharing a piece of a potential flying saucer with his son, will be a memory Jesse Marcel Jr. will recount with unwavering consistency for the rest of his life. After the brief stop at home, you head back to the base and confer with your commanding officer, Colonel William Butch Blanchard. Blanchard is the commander of the 509th, a serious, highly respected officer. You show him the material. He's just as impressed and baffled as you are. He agrees that you need to go to the source. The next morning, you and another officer, Captain Sheridan Cavett, meet up with Mac Brazel, and he leads you on a long, rugged journey to the Foster Ranch. When you arrive, you're stunned by the scale of it. The debris is scattered over an enormous area, glittering in the harsh New Mexico sun. It's exactly as Brazel described, but more. So much more. You and Cavett spend the rest of the day gathering as much of the material as you can. You fill your staff car and a jeep with the strange wreckage. The memory foil, the high beams, the black plastic-like chunks. Throughout the process, you are buzzing with the significance of the find. This is the story of a lifetime, a discovery that will change the world. Captain Cavett, however, seems strangely unimpressed. He's quiet, dismissive, suggesting it's probably just a weather balloon. This difference in reaction between you and Cavett is a point that historians and researchers find fascinating. Was Cavett simply less imaginative, or was he under orders to downplay the situation from the start? Or perhaps he saw the same materials, the foil-backed paper, the taped sticks, and correctly identified them as part of a balloon array, while your own excitement led you to a more exotic conclusion. One of the more obscure facts about Jesse Marcel is that he was a licensed pilot with thousands of flight hours and had a background in electronics and radio technology. He wasn't just a paper-pushing intelligence officer. He was technically savvy and had seen countless types of conventional aircraft, both intact and wrecked. His firm belief that the material was otherworldly carried the weight of this experience. He knew what planes were made of, and this wasn't it. As you load the last of the debris you can carry, you are certain you are holding the fragments of a crashed extraterrestrial vehicle. You and Colonel Blanchard agree that this is too big to keep under wraps. You need to let the world know. You head back to the base, a car filled with alien artifacts, ready to write the press release that will make Roswell, New Mexico, famous forever. The sense of discovery is electric. You feel like you're on the cusp of history. Back at the Roswell Army Airfield, the atmosphere is charged. You, Major Jesse Marcel, have returned with a car full of debris that defies all conventional explanation. You lay it out for Colonel Blanchard, and the two of you confirm your initial assessment. This is no weather balloon, and it's no missile. It's something entirely new. Blanchard is a decisive commander. He's not one to sit on a story this big. In his mind, the public has a right to know, or perhaps more pragmatically, he knows that a story this strange, already known by a rancher and a county sheriff, is impossible to contain for long. It's better to get out ahead of it. He makes a fateful decision. He orders the base public information officer, a young lieutenant named Walter Haut, to write a press release. You find yourself in Walter Haut's small, functional office. The air is thick with the smell of ink and the clatter of teletype machines from down the hall. Haut is a by-the-book officer. His job is to manage the base's public image, writing press releases about training exercises, personnel promotions, and community events. He has never, in his entire career, been asked to write anything like this. Blanchard gives him the direct order. We have in our possession a flying disc. It came from a ranch up north of here. You put out a press release. Haught is taken aback, but an order is an order, especially from the base commander. He sits down at his typewriter, and based on the information provided by you and Blanchard, he crafts the short, explosive paragraph that will be heard around the world. The text is simple and direct. The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force Roswell Army Airfield was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office of Chaves County. The flying object landed on a ranch near Roswell sometime last week. Not having phone facilities, the rancher stored the disc until such time as he was able to contact the sheriff's office, who in turn notified Jesse A. Marcel of the 509th Bomb Group Intelligence Office. Action was immediately taken, and the disc was picked up at the rancher's home. It was inspected at the Roswell Army Airfield and subsequently loaned by Major Marcel to higher headquarters. This press release is a masterpiece of military understatement that nonetheless manages to say something utterly sensational. Notice the phrasing, fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc. Not debris, not wreckage, but a disc. This confirms, from an official military source, the existence of the flying discs that had been the subject of sensational headlines for weeks. It's important to remember the context of the term flying saucer. It had only been coined a few weeks earlier, on June 24, 1947, when private pilot Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 shiny, crescent-shaped objects flying at incredible speed near Mount Rainier, Washington. He described their movement as being like a saucer if you skip it across the water. The press shortened this to flying saucers, and a national phenomenon was born. Now, the most elite air base in the country was claiming they had one. Once written, Haught takes the release and delivers it personally to the local radio stations, KGFL and KSWS, and the newspapers, the Roswell Daily Record and the Roswell Morning Dispatch. The moment it hits the news desk, everything explodes. Teletype machines chatter to life, sending the story out on the Associated Press and United Press wires. Within hours, the news from the sleepy desert town is a banner headline in papers from Chicago to London to Tokyo. Our AF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. The world goes wild. Historians debate whether Colonel Blanchard's decision to issue the release was a moment of shocking naivete or a calculated move. Was he genuinely so excited by the find that he bypassed the chain of command? Or was he perhaps ordered to create a temporary distraction for a public obsessed with flying discs, a distraction that would later be easily dismissed? A little-known fact is that Walter Haught decades later would sign a deathbed affidavit claiming he had not only seen the debris, but had also been shown the actual craft and the bodies of its extraterrestrial occupants, a claim that dramatically contradicted his public stance for over 50 years. For a few short hours, Roswell, New Mexico, is the center of the universe. You, Jesse Marcel, are the man of the hour, the intelligence officer who recovered an alien spacecraft. The phone at the base rings off the hook. Reporters from around the globe are trying to get more details. You are instructed to load the debris onto a B-29 Superfortress and fly it immediately to 8th Air Force Headquarters at Fort Worth Army Air Field in Texas for examination by higher-ranking officers, including your commanding general, Roger Ramey. As you prepare for the flight, you are filled with a sense of pride and vindication. You found it, you secured it, and you told the world. You have no reason to suspect that your moment of triumph is about to turn into your moment of profound and lasting humiliation. The flight to Fort Worth is buzzing with an energy that has nothing to do with the 4 massive propeller engines of the B-29. You are escorting proof of extraterrestrial visitation. You've personally packed several boxes with the most compelling pieces of the debris the memory foil, the I-beams with their strange inscriptions, the indestructible plastic. This is the cargo that will change human history. You land at what was then called Carswell Army Airfield in Fort Worth, and you're immediately met by staff officers. You're escorted to the office of General Roger Ramey, the commander of the 8th Air Force and your ultimate boss. You expect to be greeted as a hero. You expect a debriefing that will be entered into the annals of history. That is not what happens. You walk into General Ramey's office, ready to present the extraordinary evidence. But when you get there, the debris you so carefully packed is gone. It has been taken into a separate room, and you are not allowed to follow it. General Ramey and his chief of staff, Colonel Thomas Dubose, are there. They seem annoyed. Ramey tells you to calm down and says there's been a mistake. While you are in transit, they supposedly identified the material. He leads you into his office, where a mess of metallic fabric, neoprene rubber, and wooden sticks is spread out on the floor. It's the remains of a standard weather balloon with a ray, wind, or RON radar reflector target. It looks absolutely nothing like the debris you recovered from the ranch. There are no indestructible I-beams, no memory foil, no alien hieroglyphs. It's just junk. This is what you found, isn't it, Major? Ramey asks, but it's not a question. It's an order. You are stunned, confused, and deeply humiliated. You try to protest. Sir, that's not what we found. But you are a major, and he is a general. In the rigid hierarchy of the 1947 military, you do not argue with a general. The press is already here. Cameras and flashbulbs at the ready. Ramey tells you to get down on the floor with the weather balloon debris and pose for pictures. It's a moment of pure, gut-wrenching shame. You are being forced to participate in a lie, to debunk your own incredible discovery. You kneel on the floor, holding up a piece of a common balloon, your face a mask of forced composure for the cameras. You have become the face of the cover-up. This is the infamous weather balloon press conference. General Ramey calmly explains to the reporters that the excited personnel at Roswell had simply misidentified a common piece of weather equipment. The flying disc story was a mistake. Case closed. The retraction is sent out over the same news wires that had trumpeted the initial discovery just hours before. The story dies as quickly as it was born. The world, it seems, is happy to accept the mundane explanation. It makes more sense. It's less scary. One of the most debated and fascinating aspects of this scene is a memo that General Ramey is holding in some of the press photos. Ufologists have spent decades trying to enhance the blurry text of the memo, with some claiming to have deciphered phrases like victims of the wreck and a disc they will ship. Skeptics and official analysts, however, maintain the text is illegible, or, if legible, contains nothing more than mundane military chatter. This Ramey memo remains one of the story's most tantalizing pieces of potential evidence. A strange, often overlooked fact is that the military went out of its way to find the actual weather officer who had launched the balloon, a man named Irving Newton, and flew him to Fort Worth to officially identify the wreckage for the press. He confirmed it was a balloon, but later admitted he was a bit suspicious, as the debris looked like it had been torn up by hand rather than weathered by a crash. Historians debate the precise mechanics of this moment. Was the debris genuinely swapped out? A deliberate act of deception orchestrated at the highest levels? Or had Jesse Marcel, in his excitement, simply misinterpreted mundane materials, and General Ramey was just doing damage control for an overzealous subordinate? Marcel would maintain for the rest of his life that a swap had occurred. He knew what he had found, and the stuff in Ramey's office was not it. After the press conference, you are sternly warned by Colonel Dubose to never speak of the original debris again. The message is clear. Forget what you saw. You fly back to Roswell a different man. The elation is gone, replaced by a cold, quiet anger and a sense of betrayal. You went from being on the verge of making history to being the punchline of a joke. You followed orders, but you know what you saw. And you know that somewhere, in a hidden room on an Air Force base, the real wreckage, the strange, impossible material from another world is being studied in secret. The cover-up has begun, and you are its first casualty. While you, Major Marcel, are enduring your public humiliation in Fort Worth, a different kind of operation is unfolding back in New Mexico. The official story is now that a weather balloon crashed. But if that's the case, the military is going to extraordinary lengths to clean up the weather. A full-scale sanitization of the Foster Ranch debris field begins. This isn't a couple of guys in a Jeep picking up stray rubber and foil. This is a large, meticulous, and intimidating military operation. Soldiers from the Roswell base are dispatched to the site, forming a tight cordon. They sweep the area, shoulder to shoulder, picking up every last scrap of the anomalous material. The site is to be scrubbed clean, as if nothing ever happened there. And then there's the matter of the star witness. You, Mac Brazow, the rancher who started it all. Your life has been turned upside down. After you first reported the debris, you became a local celebrity. You gave an interview to the Roswell Daily Record, where you described the strange properties of the material in detail. You talked about the strong, lightweight beams, the parchment-like foil, and the odd symbols. Your account was honest, straightforward, and utterly baffling. But after the military takes over, your story changes, radically. You are located by the military and escorted to the base. You're not arrested, not officially. You're a guest at the RAF's guest house. But this is not a vacation. You are held for the better part of a week. During this time, you are debriefed. This is where the story gets murky, relying on second-hand accounts and the memories of your family. You are questioned repeatedly by military officers. They want to know every detail of what you saw, who you told, and what you did with the pieces you collected. The nature of this debriefing is a core point of contention for researchers. Was it a friendly series of interviews meant to gather information? Or was it an intense, coercive interrogation designed to intimidate you into silence and cooperation? When you finally emerge from your stay at the base, you are a changed man. You are taken to the offices of the Roswell Daily Record for a new interview, this time with a military escort. Your tune is completely different. You seem flustered, uncomfortable. You now insist that the debris was nothing more than a weather balloon. You say you've seen weather balloons before, and this was just a slightly unusual one. You express regret for even reporting it, claiming the whole thing has been a giant fuss over nothing. You tell the reporter you reassure that what you found was not a flying disc. To anyone who heard your original, excited story, the contrast is jarring. You sound rehearsed. You sound scared. Your family later reported that you were deeply shaken by the experience. You told them you made a solemn oath to the military, never to speak about what you really found in that field. You were warned that if you talked, you'd be in serious trouble. The message was delivered with the full weight of the post-war U.S. government, an entity you did not want to cross. You went from being a simple, honest rancher to a man burdened by a secret he was forced to carry. A peculiar and sad detail from this period is that other local residents who had picked up souvenir pieces of the debris were allegedly visited by soldiers who asked for the material back. These weren't polite requests, they were commands. The military wanted every last fragment accounted for. This intensive cleanup and witness management seems wildly disproportionate for a simple weather balloon. The U.S. military in 1947 was a massive organization. Thousands of weather balloons were launched and crashed every year across the country. There is no other known instance of such a massive, secretive, and intimidating recovery operation for a standard balloon. This extreme reaction is what believers point to as the strongest circumstantial evidence of a cover-up. Why go to such lengths for something so mundane? The only logical answer, they argue, is that the object was anything but mundane. Historians debate the psychological impact of this event on Mac Brazel. Did the military truly threaten him, or was he simply a man caught in a media frenzy who grew tired of the attention and wanted his quiet life back? Whatever the reason, his public recanting was a crucial victory for the military's new narrative. The primary civilian witness had now officially endorsed the weather balloon story. With Marcel discredited and Brazel silenced, the Roswell incident was effectively buried. Or so it seemed. Just as the official story seems to be settling into a neat, tidy box labeled weather balloon, the narrative fractures. Because the debris field on Mac Brazel's ranch might not have been the only crash site. Decades after the fact, a second, far more dramatic story would emerge. One that took place over 100 miles to the west on a vast, desolate expanse of desert known as the Plains of San Agustin. This second story doesn't involve scattered foil and beams. It involves a largely intact craft and its non-human occupants. You are now Barney Barnett, a respected civil engineer with the U.S. Soil Conservation Service. It's a day or two after the infamous thunderstorm, and you're working on a project out on the plains. The landscape here is even more stark and empty than at the Roswell Ranch. It's a flat, ancient lakebed surrounded by mountains, a perfect place for something to come down unnoticed. As you're driving, you spot a group of people in the distance, clustered around something on the ground. Curious, you drive over to see what the commotion is. As you get closer, your curiosity turns to disbelief. On the ground rests a large, metallic, disc-shaped object. It's not shattered into a million pieces, like the debris at the Foster Ranch. It's damaged, certainly, split open on one side, but it is recognizably a craft. It's maybe 25 or 30 feet in diameter, made of a dull, metallic material that looks like no metal you've ever seen. Standing near the craft is a group of what you initially take to be archaeologists or students from a nearby university, as they seem to be examining the scene with academic interest. And then you see them, the bodies. Lying on the ground, partially in the shadow of the craft, are several small, humanoid figures. They are not human. Their heads are large and round, disproportionate to their small, thin bodies. They have large, dark, slit-like eyes, small noses, and no discernible mouths. They are hairless and dressed in one-piece, form-fitting gray suits. Some are lying on the ground, clearly deceased, while another is slumped against the craft, perhaps dying. You stand there, frozen, trying to process the impossible sight. The other civilians at the scene are just as stunned as you are. You are all staring at the occupants of a crashed spaceship. Before you can fully absorb the scene, a military truck roars up, kicking up a cloud of dust. Soldiers pour out, weapons at the ready. An officer takes charge, and his message is blunt and unequivocal. Get the hell out of here. This is a restricted area. What you've seen here, it never happened. You didn't see anything. You and the other civilians are escorted away under armed guard. You are warned in the sternest possible terms to never, ever speak of what you witnessed. The threat is not subtle. You are terrified, and you comply. You keep the secret for years, telling only your wife and a few very close friends, swearing them to secrecy. This is the Barney Barnett story, a cornerstone of the second crash site theory. It adds the explosive element of an actual ship and alien bodies to the Roswell narrative. The geography of New Mexico is vast enough to accommodate multiple incidents. The state was a hub of military and scientific activity in 1947, with White Sands Missile Range, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and the RAFO operating in the region. The idea that a single event could have resulted in a craft breaking up in mid-air, scattering light debris over the Brazel Ranch, while the main body of the craft continued on to crash on the plains of San Agustin, is a theory that attempts to unify the two narratives. The credibility of this story hinges almost entirely on Barnett himself. He was, by all accounts, a sober, credible, and well-respected professional, not given to making up wild tales. A peculiar, lesser-known detail is that Barnett allegedly told his friends that the material of the craft felt strangely like aluminum foil, a detail that intriguingly links his experience with the memory foil found by Mac Brazel miles away. However, the Barnett story has problems. It emerged many years after the fact, and Barnett himself died in 1969 before ufologists could ever interview him directly. The story comes to us secondhand, through the friends he confided in. Skeptics argue it's a classic example of story migration, where details from other UFO tales and science fiction movies, like the design of the aliens, may have been retroactively applied to a half-remembered or fabricated event. Historians debate whether the Barnett account represents a genuine, separate crash event, a confused retelling of the primary Roswell debris story, or a complete confabulation that was later grafted onto the Roswell legend to make it more exciting. Whatever its origin, the story of the crash on the plains of San Agustin fundamentally changed the Roswell mystery, transforming it from a story about strange materials into a story about alien life and death. The stories of strange debris and a second crash site are explosive enough, but there is one more pillar of the high strangeness Roswell narrative, one that brings the story from the desolate plains directly into the heart of the town itself. This is the story of the bodies, and it comes from a man whose profession placed him in a unique position to know, the local mortician, Glenn Dennis. You are now Glenn Dennis, a young man working at the Ballard Funeral Home in Roswell. It's a respectable, if somber, business. Your job involves providing ambulance services, preparing bodies, and supplying caskets. One afternoon, during the height of the Roswell incident, you get a series of strange phone calls from the Roswell Army Airfield. It's a mortuary officer on the line. He has some unusual questions. He asks you, hypothetically, how you would go about preparing bodies that have been exposed to the elements for several days. That's a fairly standard question. But then he asks about preservation techniques for bodies that have been contaminated by some unknown chemical or biological agent. He wants to know what kind of casket you would use to hermetically seal such remains. And then comes the strangest question of all. The officer asks if you have any small, child-sized, hermetically sealed caskets in stock. You reply that you do, but you're puzzled. You ask what happened. Was there an accident on the base involving children? The officer becomes curt, defensive. He tells you it's none of your business and that you will be contacted if your services are needed. The calls leave you unsettled. Child-sized caskets for the military? It makes no sense. Later that day, you get a call to the base for a routine ambulance run to pick up an injured airman. While you're at the base hospital, you see something that piques your curiosity. There's a flurry of unusual activity. 2 military ambulances are parked at the back loading dock, their doors open. You see military police securing the area, and you catch a glimpse of strange, metallic wreckage being carried out of one of the ambulances. Wreckage that matches the descriptions of the debris from the Foster Ranch. You decide to pop inside the hospital to see a nurse you're friendly with. You find her in the doctor's lounge, and she seems distraught, agitated. Before you can have a proper conversation, a commanding officer sees you, demands to know who you are, and has 2 MPs escort you roughly from the building. You are warned to forget everything you saw and to never speak of it again. The next day, the nurse contacts you. She agrees to meet you for coffee. She is terrified, but she feels she has to tell someone what she saw. She tells you she was called in to assist with a preliminary autopsy on several bodies that had been brought to the base. She describes them in chilling detail. They were small, about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. They had massive bald heads, large, deep-set eyes, and only small slits for a nose and mouth. Their bodies were frail, with long, thin arms and hands that had only 4 fingers and no opposable thumb. She said the bodies were badly damaged from the crash, but were clearly not human. She described the overpowering, noxious smell in the autopsy room. The experience had horrified and traumatized her. She drew you a diagram of the beings on a napkin to show you what she had seen. At the end of your meeting, she tells you she is being transferred to a base in England, effective immediately. You never see or hear from her again. This is the Glenn Dennis testimony. For years, it was considered one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for the existence of alien bodies. Dennis was a known and respected member of the Roswell community. A lesser-known, quirky detail is that Dennis claimed the MPs who escorted him out of the hospital were a red-headed captain and a large African-American sergeant. Specific details that lend a veneer of authenticity to his recollection. However, like many parts of the Roswell story, Dennis's account has come under intense scrutiny. Researchers investigating his claims found significant inconsistencies. They could find no record of the nurse he named ever serving at the RAF hospital. The names he provided for the officers involved didn't match base records. Skeptics argue that Dennis, perhaps caught up in the renewed Roswell fervor of the 1980s and 90s, either fabricated the story or confabulated it, mixing real memories with details he'd heard from other UFO stories. Historians debate the credibility of the Morticianess tale more fiercely than almost any other part of the Roswell saga. Is Glenn Dennis a brave whistleblower who risked everything to tell the truth about a secret autopsy? Or is he an unreliable narrator whose story, while compelling, simply doesn't stand up to factual verification? The debate highlights the central problem of Roswell research. Almost all of the bombshell evidence relies on decades-old eyewitness testimony, which is notoriously prone to error, embellishment, and contamination. Yet the image Dennis painted of small sealed caskets and frantic doctors working on strange, 4-fingered beings in a secret room has become one of the most enduring and powerful images in all of ufology. After the flurry of excitement, the official retraction, and the quiet intimidation of the key witnesses, a strange and profound silence falls over the Roswell story. For the next 3 decades, one of the most sensational events of the 20th century simply vanishes. It fades from the headlines and from public consciousness, becoming little more than a historical footnote, a curious blip that was quickly explained away. The world moves on. You are now the collective American consciousness of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. You have other things to worry about. The Cold War is in full swing, a period of sustained, low-grade dread, punctuated by moments of sheer terror like the Cuban Missile Crisis. School children are practicing duck and cover drills, a stark reminder of the atomic threat that was born, in part, right there in New Mexico. The focus of the nation turns from strange things in the desert to the skies above, but in a different way. The space race against the Soviet Union captivates the world. You watch as Sputnik deeps its way across the night sky, as Alan Shepard and John Glenn rocket into space, and finally, in 1969, as Neil Armstrong takes one small step onto the surface of the moon. With humanity now reaching for the stars ourselves, the idea of a crashed saucer in a sheep pasture seems almost quaint, a relic of a more naive time. During this long, quiet period, the Roswell incident is not entirely forgotten, but it is relegated to the fringes. It appears occasionally in books written by early UFO investigators like Donald Keyhoe and Frank Edwards, but it's never presented as a cornerstone case. It's just one of hundreds of strange sightings and reports. It doesn't have the special status it would later acquire. It's thus treated as a classic example of flying saucer flap that was quickly and plausibly debunked. The official weather balloon story, backed by the full authority of the U.S. military, was accepted by the mainstream press and the public at large. After all, who are you going to believe? A handful of hicks from the desert or a 4-star general? The question answered itself. The key players in the original drama retreat into their private lives. Mac Brazel returns to his ranch, forever burdened by the secret he was forced to keep. He passes away in 1963, taking the full story of what he saw to his grave. Sheriff George Wilcox and his family move away from Roswell, tired of the occasional crank calls and lingering questions about the saucer they helped report. Jesse Marcel continues his distinguished military career, but the Roswell incident is a black mark on his record, a moment of perceived poor judgment. He is a good soldier and follows his orders to remain silent. He retires from the Air Force and settles into a quiet life in Louisiana. The debris, the real debris, if it ever existed, is presumably locked away in the deepest, darkest vault at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or some other secure facility, a place known in UFO lore as Hangar 18. A peculiar, little-known fact from this era is the almost complete lack of official documentation regarding the incident in declassified files. When researchers later filed Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, requests for documents from the RA for the period of July 1947, they found that virtually all of the administrative records, the outgoing and incoming messages, were mysteriously missing. They had been destroyed at some point, a breach of standard military protocol. Skeptics argue this was likely due to routine, if sloppy, housekeeping. Believers see it as definitive proof of a cover-up, a deliberate purging of the historical record to erase all traces of the event. Historians debate why the story remained dormant for so long. Part of the answer lies in the media landscape of the time. Without the internet, without 24-hour cable news, stories had a much shorter shelf life. Once the official explanation was given, the press simply moved on to the next big thing. There was no sustained, independent investigation. Furthermore, the culture of the 1950s was one of deference to authority. The military had won the war and was seen as a trusted institution. If they said it was a weather balloon, then it was a weather balloon. The Men in Black phenomenon, a staple of UFO lore where government agents intimidate witnesses into silence, may have had its roots in the very real experiences of men like Brazel and Dennis. The threat of official repercussions was a powerful silencer. For 30 years, the truth of Roswell, whatever it was, lay buried under the weight of a single mundane word: balloon. The desert kept its secrets, and the world spun on, oblivious. The long silence is finally broken, not by a thunderclap, but by a quiet, persistent voice. The year is 1978. The world has changed. The Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal have eroded public trust in the government. There's a new willingness to believe that authorities might lie, might cover things up. And into this climate of suspicion steps a man named Stanton Friedman, a nuclear physicist by training and a UFO researcher by passion. You are now Stanton Friedman, and you are about to single-handedly resurrect the ghost of Roswell. You're not a wild-eyed conspiracy theorist. You're a scientist, and you approach the UFO subject with academic rigor. You travel the country, giving lectures at universities and community centers, poring over old documents, and hunting for credible witnesses to unexplained aerial phenomena. During your research, you keep coming across fleeting references to the 1947 Roswell story. It intrigues you because of the initial, official flying disc confirmation from the military. That's an anomaly that can't be easily dismissed. You decide to find out what happened to the intelligence officer mentioned in the original press release, Major Jesse Marcel. You have a hunch that he might be the key. After some diligent searching, this is the pre-Google era, remember, involving phone books and cross-referencing old records. You track him down. Jesse Marcel is now retired, living a quiet life in Houma, Louisiana. You call him up, introduce yourself, and ask him about what happened in Roswell 30 years ago. At first, Marcel is hesitant. He's an old soldier, and he's kept his silence for decades as ordered. But something in your persistent, respectful questioning opens the floodgates. The story that he has suppressed for a generation comes pouring out. You sit captivated as Marcel, now in his 70s, recounts the events of July 1947 with remarkable clarity. He tells you about the call from the sheriff, the strange debris at the ranch, and his initial excitement. He describes the materials in detail: the foil that wouldn't crease, the I-beams that wouldn't bend or burn, and the purple, hieroglyphic-like symbols. Most importantly, he tells you, with a voice full of long-held indignation, about the trip to Fort Worth and the forced press conference. He is adamant. "That was not what I picked up," he says. "It was a cover-up." He tells you how he was forced to pose with a common weather balloon, and how he was ordered to never speak of the real material again. He's been carrying this burden of truth and humiliation for 30 years. And now, finally, someone is listening. This interview is the spark that relights the Roswell fire. You know you have something monumental. This isn't a second-hand rumor. This is the primary military witness, the man who handled the material, going on the record to say the official story was a lie. You also interview his son, Jesse Marcel Jr., who vividly recalls his father waking him up in the middle of the night to show him pieces of a real-life flying saucer on the kitchen floor. His testimony corroborates his father's account of the material's strange properties. A quirky but significant detail that Friedman seized upon was Marcel's background as a nuclear-age intelligence officer. Here was the man entrusted with the security of the nation's only atomic bomb squadron. And the Air Force wanted the world to believe he couldn't tell the difference between a spaceship and a weather balloon. The premise seemed absurd. Friedman's work is tireless. He understands that one witness, no matter how credible, is not enough. He begins a long and painstaking process of finding other people who were in Roswell in 1947. He tracks down neighbors of Mac Brazel, who recall seeing the strange debris. He interviews the son of Sheriff Wilcox. He unearths the story of Barney Barnett and the second crash site. He is the first person to connect the dots and realize the potential scope of the event. Historians debate the nature of Friedman's investigative techniques. Critics argue that he sometimes used leading questions and may have unintentionally coached his elderly witnesses, helping them shape fragmented memories into a cohesive, dramatic narrative. Supporters maintain that he was simply a skilled interviewer who earned the trust of people who had been afraid to speak for decades, allowing the true story to finally emerge. The result of your Stanton Friedman's work is a slow-building explosion. You start publishing articles and giving lectures specifically about your Roswell investigation. The story, with its compelling hero in Jesse Marcel and its villainous cover-up by the government, is a perfect modern myth. It captures the public imagination in a way it never did in 1947. You have taken a forgotten 30-year-old news report and transformed it into the single most important and iconic UFO case in history. The lull is over. The investigation has begun anew, and this time it will not be silenced. With Stanton Friedman's groundwork laid and Jesse Marcel's explosive testimony now public, the Roswell story escapes the confines of niche ufology and crashes into mainstream popular culture. The catalyst for this is the oldest form of mass media, the printed word. In 1980, authors Charles Berlitz and William L. Moore publish a book that will define the Roswell narrative for a generation. Asterisk, The Roswell Incident Asterisk. You are now a curious reader in the early 1980s, browsing the aisles of a B. Dalton or Walden books. You see the paperback cover with its stark, intriguing title. You pick it up. Berlitz is a famous name. His previous book, The Bermuda Triangle, was a runaway bestseller that blended historical mysteries with paranormal speculation. This new book promises to do the same for the UFO phenomenon. You buy the book, take it home, and are drawn into a story that reads like a thriller. The book lays out the entire case in a clear, compelling narrative. It presents the testimony of Jesse Marcel as its centerpiece, detailing his discovery, his conviction that the material was otherworldly, and his subsequent humiliation in the cover-up. It introduces the Barney Barnett story of the second crash site and the alien bodies. It weaves together all the threads that Friedman had painstakingly uncovered into a single, cohesive account of a crashed spaceship, a government conspiracy, and a 30-year secret. The Roswell incident is a massive success. It sells millions of copies worldwide. For the first time, the complete, high-strangeness version of the story is available to everyone. It's no longer just a topic of discussion in UFO magazines. It's being read on beaches, on subways, and in suburban living rooms across America. The book's publication has a snowball effect. It prompts more potential witnesses to come forward. People who were children in Roswell in 1947 or had relatives who worked at the base. Suddenly, everyone seems to have a piece of the story. Some of these new accounts are invaluable, adding corroborating details. Others are more suspect, seemingly embellished or fabricated to get a piece of the newfound fame. This is the era when the stories of Glenn Dennis, the mortician, and his nurse friend really gain traction, solidifying the alien bodies aspect of the legend. It's also when supporting testimony from people like Frank Kaufman, a former civilian employee at the RAF, emerges. Kaufman would make sensational claims about being part of a secret retrieval team and seeing the alien craft and its crew. The impact of mass-market paperbacks in the 1980s cannot be overstated. They were the internet of their day, capable of creating and shaping national conversations. The book codified the Roswell mythos, establishing the key characters, locations, and plot points that are still cited today. The book's success inevitably leads to television. Documentaries and TV specials begin to appear, most notably a 1989 episode of the popular series Unsolved Mysteries. Hosted by the trench-coated, grim-faced Robert Stack, the segment presented the Roswell story with dramatic reenactments and interviews with the key witnesses like Jesse Marcel Jr. and Glenn Dennis. For millions of viewers, this is their first introduction to the case. Seeing the elderly witnesses tell their stories on camera, their voices filled with conviction, has a powerful impact. It makes the story feel real and immediate. One odd, little-known consequence of this media saturation was the Roswell Rock, a strange, carved stone with geometric patterns found in the desert near Roswell in 2004 that bore a striking resemblance to a crop circle design. Many in the UFO community believed it was an alien artifact, while geologists identified it as a man-made carving on a common type of rock. A perfect example of how the legend can inspire new evidence. However, this explosion of media attention is a double-edged sword. As more and more sensational claims are added to the story, it becomes harder to separate credible testimony from tall tales. Frank Kaufman's stories, for instance, were later largely discredited by researchers who found his claims to be unverifiable and often contradictory. The original, relatively simple story of strange debris found on a ranch was becoming buried under layers of melodrama, secret cabals, and ever more dramatic eyewitness accounts. Historians debate the reliability of these second-wave witnesses who came forward in the 80s and 90s. Were they brave truth-tellers, finally unburdened by fear? Or were they victims of memory contamination, their own faint recollections reshaped by the powerful narratives they were reading in books and seeing on TV? Or were some simply opportunists looking for their 15 minutes of fame? Regardless, the Roswell story was now firmly entrenched in the public consciousness, a modern American folktale that was about to provoke a long-overdue response from the one entity that had remained silent for decades, the United States government itself. By the early 1990s, the Roswell story has become a persistent thorn in the side of the U.S. government. The narrative of a massive, ongoing cover-up now cemented in the public mind by books, documentaries, and a hit TV show called The X-Files, is fueling widespread distrust. The pressure from the public, and more importantly, from a New Mexico congressman named Stephen Schiff, who starts making official inquiries on behalf of his constituents, including Glenn Dennis, becomes too much to ignore. The Air Force, the successor to the Army Air Forces of 1947, is finally forced to reopen the case and provide a definitive answer. You are now an Air Force investigator in the mid-1990s, tasked with a bizarre historical project, debunking America's favorite UFO story once and for all. Your mission is to scour the archives, re-examine the evidence, and produce a report that will close the book on Roswell. In 1994, the first of these reports is released, titled The Roswell Report: Fact versus Fiction in the New Mexico Desert. It is the government's first comprehensive statement on the incident in nearly 50 years. The report's conclusion is blunt. The debris found by Mac Brazel was not from an alien spacecraft. It was, the report claims, from a top-secret military program called Project Mogul. This is the first time Project Mogul has been publicly linked to the Roswell incident. You explain that Mogul was a highly classified project using trains of high-altitude balloons equipped with microphones and radar reflectors. Its purpose was to listen for the sound waves generated by Soviet atomic bomb tests, effectively acting as a long-range acoustic detection system. The balloons were made of neoprene, and the radar reflectors were constructed from balsa wood sticks, foil-backed paper, and held together with tape. The report argues that one of these massive balloon trains, specifically designated Flight No. 4, launched from a nearby base, is what crashed on the Foster Ranch. This, you contend, explains everything. The memory foil was just the radar reflector material. The I-beams were the balsa sticks. The strange hieroglyphs? The report resurrects the old explanation. It was just floral pattern adhesive tape used by the manufacturer. The report argues that the secrecy surrounding Project Mogul is why the military was so quick to shut the story down, and why they couldn't simply say, "It's one of our secret spy balloons." The weather balloon story was a cover story for a cover story. The Project Mogul explanation is plausible. It accounts for the strange materials, the secrecy, and the military's strong reaction. For skeptics, it's the perfect, elegant solution, the Occam's razor answer that explains the event without resorting to aliens. But for believers, it's just another layer of deception. They point out that Jesse Marcel, an experienced intelligence officer, would surely have recognized balloon debris, no matter how secret. And what about the bodies? The 1994 report completely sidesteps the issue of the alien bodies reported by Barnett and Dennis, claiming there was no evidence of any such thing. The public pressure doesn't let up. The question of the bodies still hangs in the air. So, in 1997, on the 50th anniversary of the incident, the Air Force releases a second, even more detailed report, the Roswell Report, Case Closed. This report tackles the body question head-on with an explanation that is, for many, even stranger than the alien theory itself. The alien bodies, the report claims, were actually anthropomorphic test dummies. You explained that during the 1950s, the Air Force conducted a series of high-altitude parachute drop tests called Project High Dive, which used these lifelike dummies to study the effects of high-altitude bailouts. These dummies were dropped from balloons all over New Mexico. The report suggests that witnesses who remembered seeing bodies were simply conflating the 1947 debris event with memories of seeing these crash test dummies a few years later. This explanation is met with widespread ridicule. The timeline is the most glaring problem. The dummy drops took place primarily between 1953 and 1959, 6 to 12 years after the Roswell incident. The idea that multiple witnesses independently confused events separated by so many years strikes many as absurd. A particularly weird and wonderful fact is that the specific type of dummy used in many of these tests was nicknamed Sierra Sam. The image of little Sierra Sams being mistaken for dead aliens became a running joke. Historians debate the strategic thinking behind the Air Force reports. Were they a genuine good faith effort to declassify old records and provide the public with the most accurate, non-extraterrestrial explanation possible? Or were they a clumsy, almost contemptuous attempt to quiet the public with explanations so convoluted a secret balloon project, or ridiculous? Time-traveling crash test dummies that they only added fuel to the conspiracy fire? For the true believers, the Air Force reports were the final proof. The government was trying way too hard. They were clearly still hiding something. Decades after the Air Force declared the case closed, the town of Roswell, New Mexico, has made its own verdict. And that verdict is that aliens are good for business. The legacy of the 1947 incident is no longer just a matter of historical debate. It's the town's lifeblood, its identity, its entire brand. The mystery has transformed a sleepy agricultural community into a global tourist destination. You are a visitor arriving in Roswell today. The moment you enter the city limits, you know you're not in a normal town. The streetlights are shaped like alien heads with big, dark eyes. The welcome sign features a friendly-looking green man waving from a silver saucer. The Walmart has a flying saucer crashed into its facade. Everywhere you look, the alien motif is present. From the mural on the side of a law firm, depicting a cosmic handshake to the alien-themed menu items at the local McDonald's, which is, of course, shaped like a UFO. What was once a source of fear, secrecy, and national security concern is now a source of civic pride and kitschy fun. You walk down Main Street and visit the epicenter of this phenomenon, the International UFO Museum and Research Center. It was co-founded by Walter Haut, the very man who wrote the original flying disc press release back in 1947. Inside, you find a lovingly curated, if decidedly one-sided, presentation of the Roswell story. You see detailed dioramas of the crash site, elaborate displays on the witness testimonies of Marcel, Dennis, and Barnett, and walls covered with newspaper clippings and enhanced photos of the Ramey memo. The museum is less a neutral historical institution and more a temple dedicated to the belief that we are not alone. And the proof crashed right here. It draws hundreds of thousands of visitors a year, each of them contributing to the local economy. The commercialization of the incident is total. You can buy alien head keychains, I believe t-shirts, inflatable aliens, and bottles of alien amber ale. Every summer, the town hosts the Roswell UFO Festival, a multi-day event featuring costume contests, a parade with alien-themed floats, guest lectures from ufologists, and live music. It's a celebration that fully embraces the weirdness of the town's history. A truly quirky fact is that the city of Roswell officially incorporated a stylized alien head into its city seal, making it one of the only municipal governments in the world to formally acknowledge a debt to extraterrestrial visitors. It's a surreal fusion of civic administration and science fiction. But beneath the tourist-friendly surface, the deep divide between believers and skeptics remains. For the believers, the town is a pilgrimage site. It's a place to connect with the biggest secret in human history. They see the commercialism as a cheerful but necessary byproduct of keeping the story alive. They point to the sincerity of the original witnesses and the sheer absurdity of the government as shifting explanations, as proof that something extraordinary happened here. They are the keepers of the flame. For the skeptics, Roswell is a case study in modern myth-making. They see a town that has expertly monetized a combination of Cold War paranoia, mistaken identity, and decades of rumor mongering. They argue that the desire to believe is so strong that it has elevated a mundane event into a quasi-religious narrative, immune to facts and rational explanation. Historians debate whether the commercialization of Roswell has ultimately helped or hindered the search for the truth, On one hand, the tourism and media attention have kept the story in the public eye, preventing it from being forgotten again. It has funded research and provided a platform for witnesses to be heard. On the other hand, it has turned a serious historical question into a pop culture spectacle. The line between credible research and sensational entertainment has become hopelessly blurred. The goofy, green-skinned alien of the gift shops bears little resemblance to the small, gray, four-fingered beings described by the original witnesses. The narrative has been simplified, sanitized, and made safe for mass consumption. The raw, unsettling core of the original event, the genuine fear and confusion of the witnesses, the cold intimidation by the military, is often lost amidst the festive atmosphere. The town of Roswell has found its answer, but it's an economic one, not an existential one. The truth, as they say, is still out there. So here you are, at the end of this long and winding road, standing under the vast, silent sky of the New Mexico desert. The sun is setting, painting the mesas in shades of orange and deep purple, the same colors that witnesses saw in the strange, symbolic I-beams all those years ago. What do you truly know after all this time? You know that in July 1947, something fell from the sky and crashed on a ranch near Roswell. You know that the United States military initially announced they had recovered a flying disc, a sensational claim they retracted within 24 hours. You know the official explanation shifted from weather balloon to project, Mogul secret balloon to crash test dummies. And you know that dozens of credible first-hand witnesses maintained for the rest of their lives that what they saw was not of this world. Beyond that, everything dissolves into a haze of mystery, contradiction, and belief. The Roswell incident is not a single clear story. It is a collection of stories, a braid of conflicting narratives woven together over decades. You have the simple, tangible mystery of the debris field, with its strange physical materials. You have the dramatic cinematic tale of a second crash site, complete with a ship and its alien crew. You have the grim medical mystery of the mortician and the secret autopsies. And you have the overarching political thriller of a government cover-up, a secret held for more than 75 years. Which story is true? Perhaps all of them. Perhaps none of them. The principle of Occam's razor, the idea that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one, would lead you to the Project Mogul theory. It's a clean, terrestrial explanation that accounts for most of the facts without requiring a leap into the extraordinary. And yet, it feels incomplete. It doesn't quite account for the passion and consistency of witnesses like Jesse Marcel, who was, by all accounts, an honest man. A final poignant fact about Major Marcel is that after he retired, he lived a quiet life, never seeking fame or fortune from his story. He simply told what he knew to anyone who would listen, right up until his death in 1986. An old soldier still fighting for a truth he believed he had held in his own hands. His quiet conviction is hard to dismiss. Ultimately, historians debate whether the lasting legacy of Roswell is the story of a government conspiracy or a case study in the creation of modern folklore. It has become a powerful cultural myth, a story we tell ourselves about secrecy, power, and our place in the universe. It reflects our deepest anxieties about government overreach and our most profound hopes that we are not alone. The story persists not because the evidence is ironclad, but because the questions it raises are so fundamental. The ambiguity is the point. The lack of a clear answer is what allows the story to live and breathe, to be whatever we need it to be, a conspiracy, a folktale, a warning, or a promise. The truth of Roswell may not be buried in a government vault, but in the human heart's incredible capacity to wonder. And so, the desert grows quiet once more. The last light fades from the sky, and the stars begin to appear, scattered like a field of glittering debris across the vast, dark expanse. You can feel the cool night air on your skin, carrying the scent of dust and sage. The story of Roswell, with all its noise and contradiction, fades back into the landscape, becoming just another whisper on the wind. The questions remain, hanging in the star-filled silence. But for now, the investigation is over. The witnesses have all gone home. The need for answers dissolves, replaced by a calm acceptance of the mystery. It's time to let the quiet of the desert settle over you, to let the edges of this strange, complicated history soften and blur. There is nothing left to do now but rest, to drift away from the wreckage and the secrets, and to let your own gentle breathing be the only sound you hear. The sky above is peaceful, and the night is deep.